It has been 5 months since I decided to take the plunge and become a developer, I think is what the video was. Now, this was not, hey, I want to learn this one language. I want to be develop skills so I can get a job as a software developer. Nothing like that. To me, software development has always been just the ultimate skill expression, taking all these things that you know, putting in a piece of software, and then making something completely new and awesome. And that's really what I wanted to do. And in 5 months, we've created some really amazing things. And I wanted to jump through the different languages and different projects I've made with each language, collaboration, those types of things, things I've learned, failures and successes. Oh, so much to go over. So I'm going to jump through 4 different projects. One's going to be Python based. One's going to be Rust and uses shell script as well. One's going to be PowerShell, of course, Windows utility. The other one is also going to be C# and .NET. It's kind of learning all these different things and how they just tie in together. Let's get it. Let's jump in. It's going to be a little bit of a longer video. So if there's a specific language you want to see my impressions on and what I ended up doing, but let's walk through these 4 projects because each one kind of is like my own child or baby, and some of them are just aggravating to no end, and others are just like, okay, that's a special case. So let's get into it. All right, starting off, we started in July 15th about, where really you can see it start kicking off here, and we were just really big, kind of lost steam here in the last month or so as the holidays approach. But Age of Titus, this was Age of Empires 4, and basically Python scripting to its core. I used it as a website, and I used Python scripts to call a game API called AOE4 World, and then it would grab all my games I played in this game, and then I would also live stream it to a secondary YouTube channel, and that was always recording. That's the beauty of YouTube, is everything can be recorded forever. So then I'd call that API as well and then scrape it so then I could get a direct history. Now, I haven't played the game in several weeks now, but Sir Liechtenstein, someone's a fan of the Knight's Tale, against the Holy Roman Empire, and that was a win. Opponent rating, all that gets scraped from AOE4 World. And then if you click on this, should be the start of the game. And there it is. So the very start of this one, and you can see the exact one. We could actually look at this game forever, which is kind of cool because AOE4 World, you can only, or AOE4, you can only play back games you've like it since the last patch. So only usually about a couple weeks to a month or so. And now I can have this immortalized forever. Looking at the scripts here, if we go into GitHub, I made it all GitHub actions and scripts. I have 3 different Python scripts, and I want to walk you through each one, what they do. The first one, I basically just made so it would scrape AOE4 World and grab the games that I've recently played. So the last gaming session I did, I didn't want a gap longer than 2 hours because no game will ever go over 2 hours in AOE4, or at least it shouldn't. And then it'll go back and check the 4-hour ones. And then what it does is it scrapes those games going through. And I'm doing like a lot of stripping and grabbing each different one and properly formatting it from there. And then at the very end, it outputs to a text file, recent games, chapters, intro, and then all the games themselves. So then I can go through, and it's a very standardized format. And then I can either push that directly to YouTube if I wanted to do write access through YouTube API, which is a bit scary. So a lot of times at the end of my gaming session, I would just run this Python script locally, take those games, put it into my live stream at the time, and then it could be scraped later, and it has proper timestamps without me lifting a finger, other than just running one script, and then it just makes a perfect time-stamped video with everything properly formatted. The next Python script is the update games. This actually makes the markdown file using Hugo. The big thing here was taking all those games, grabbing like the MMRs, best and worst losses, and making like a Hall of Fame, and then simply just scraping all those games and making it in this format right here. Also very fun kind of going through here. making it. And then probably the hardest thing that probably took me the most time was dealing with the YouTube API here. Now, the API keys you don't want to expose. You know, a lot of major companies can expose API keys. I think of the last one in my head was that terrible AI device. I think it was Rabbit. They had like exposed their API key. If you're using GitHub or any kind of deployment, Cloudflare also has it. You would make like a key called API key or whatever, secret key or whatever you want to call it. And then you'd reference that API key here and then assign it a value to be run in the script. So then you can publish that script without people grabbing your API keys. Don't expose your API keys, right? On a live stream when I showed some of this, I screwed that up and showed it and I had to wipe out that key. So this is what it does is it goes through and finds that updated games Python script, calls that in, and then it goes, okay, great, found the partial match and everything where that's at in this YouTube video. Then it makes the YouTube hyperlink and then drops it and updates the games file itself, which is right here for the video link. So this was a lot of fun kind of working through this, and it worked pretty darn well. I haven't been really doing it much anymore just because I'm not burnt out on the game. I still like it, but using it for like the live aspect and developing and being on YouTube, it was just too much. So a lot of times I just play that offline now. But that was Python scripting, and what my final thoughts on Python were is very easy to do if you have just a whole bunch of stuff kind of scattered around and you're just trying to put it together and you want just it's kind of a mix between a scripting language and an actual like low level language, and it's like an in-between of like something like Bash or PowerShell and something like C. So it fits in there. So where C might not make sense for it, but also you can't fully script it. I feel like Python just is kind of like in the middle. And since I was touching so many different systems, it was okay. The problem with Python I find is it's just slow. And I don't like the syntax very much. So my thoughts on Python is I kind of hate using it, but in that application, it made sense. And I think a lot of times people get like, hey, I'm going to learn this one language and just use it for everything. And you can do that usually, especially the low level languages you can use for pretty much everything. But should you? Is that going to be faster? Is it going to hinder development time? All these things. If you want to just move fast and build software, a lot of times you should be thinking what the language you're using, is this the best application of it? And that's what I think of. So I really don't care what language I'm using. It's more of, hey, what's the best language probably to do this thing? And that's what I'm thinking when I'm doing these projects. Now, this one, I kind of got goaded into using Rust, and that was Chat's. I'm going to blame Chat on this one. I'm not very good with Rust, but this was kind of a really cool piece of software because how we did it was there's two parts of it, actually two languages that we're mostly using, Bash scripting and then Rust. So we have it split into two parts. There's the core and then the TUI. Now the TUI, if you look at our cargo file here, it's split into the dependencies, like it's built with a libraries called like Ratatouille, and it may not be called libraries. Maybe it's like cargo containers or, Rust uses different terminology. So I know I'm butchering the terminology here, but the thing I love the most about this was cargo and Rust, and building in Rust was really fun. And I love the fact that once you got it built, it just worked. And you never had to worry about, hey, how efficient is this? Typically, if it compiled and you could run it, it was fast and it just worked really well. And we had a lot of collaboration. And what ended up happening was I programmed just a little bit of the Rust side of things, and then the open source community kind of took over and just like, nah, that's stupid, Titus. Here's what you need to do. And then I ended up doing a ton of code review on this project. So much so that it was just became this massive thing where I think literally we got over 100 different collaborators over here now. And it was just a lot. So the thing I learned more about the Rust section was really cool language. And from a low level language, I feel like this project could be used for a lot of things. I actually got contacted by a college. I want to say, I don't remember the college name, but it was a pretty big college, and they wanted to use the TUI section from this. And I was like, yeah, it's open source, MIT license, take it, use it for what you want. Because what we did with the source code was when this TUI gets built and it runs, which here let's just hit the play button so you can kind of see. This is what it ended up being. You have all these different commands, tab selection, and you could go through, you could do multi-selection, you could do all these different things. And the idea was to just make it all possible. So any Linux that you're on, you could just run linutil and then just do the thing you're wanting to do. A lot of problems with Linux utility I found was there's just so many different configurations of Linux. So probably my first mistake was developing Linux is difficult. It's the most difficult operating system to build for because there's just so many different configurations, flavors. You know, you have immutable, you have atomic, you have standard, and then you have all these different system configurations, hardware configurations, all these things to take into effect, where like Windows or Mac, you kind of know what you're getting. And I think that's why most people from a software point of view never build software for Linux, because of this. It's just so much to support. And I think really what you'll see is big companies adopting something like Steam OS, where it's just all immutable, it's easily controlled, and then it has really specific hardware requirements to where it's easier to build for. But from a programming aspect, I really loved this. I love building for the linutil, and building this TUI out was amazing. I'm really proud of what the community ended up building here. And I say community because a lot of this was me doing code review, and the big things I actually coded and spent days on was mostly the shell scripts that powered a lot of this stuff. And what that looks like is when you're in the core here, and these tab views, what it does is it calls the tabs toml file and says, here's all the tabs on the left side. And it's just from a toml. Now we could have chosen, YAML. You could choose a lot of different things. JSON would also be appropriate, but I like toml just because that's what Chads use. If you use JSON, if you use YAML, you're brain damaged. So toml is the correct choice here for everything. That's my thought process after messing with all these different ones, which the next project we won't use toml. But I love toml. It's just, I think it's Tom's markup language or something like that. Whatever it is, I just like using toml for building software. I feel like it's just the best. And maybe in the future, I'll convert some of my other projects from like JSON over to toml. I've never used YAML except when I was forced to. But the cool thing here was you could specify these directories and then go, okay, so utils would build this out, and then you have a tab data here, and then you could specify different match cases and preconditions to display on, hey, this is a Fedora user. So Fedora users will probably need under system setup. Yeah, Fedora. So Fedora, if you look at the tab data, it'll only display Arch Linux when pacman exists, the command pacman exists. And it'll only display Fedora when the command DNF is there. So all these are all built in toml, to where you can just go through and just, anybody can do these plain text readable things without knowing a programming language. So the idea was to compartmentalize it using Rust into these different ones and build shell scripts and toml scripts to kind of power and specify and organize those in a really easy to use terminal, which is great. So this has been fun, and it's just the full undertaking and scope of this project. I just bit off more than I can chew. I mean, really, I'm not afraid to admit it. It's just there's so many different configurations in Linux, and supporting all these flavors of Linux is impossible. They just change, and you'd have to pick and say, hey, I'm only going to support Arch, or I'm only going to support this version of it. And then the Arch Linux communities, or just the Linux community in general, is just already pretty small. And then when you fragment it further and say you're only going to support a section of that niche community, it's just kind of like, okay, and you're spending all this development time when you could just be building for Mac or Windows. I get why software developers don't develop for Linux. It's just the hardest to program for, the hardest to support, and the smallest market share. So I that dawned on me pretty quick, and I was like, okay, I get it. But a fun project, and building all these scripts out, building the TUI, open sourcing it all. And if any of this looks cool and you want to steal from this project, again, go to linutil on GitHub. The TUI, you can delete all these shell scripts and then just build your own tab data and use this as your go-to. I love this. It was a fun project. Next up is WinUtil. Now, this has been going for like 4 years, and I've just been going crazy with this one. Now, we've got a pretty good beat on this now. One of the biggest things I've programmed probably in the last couple months is fixing WinGet. I have a PR open, and I just wanted to do some more testing on this. But the idea of installing WinGet on a whole bunch of different systems and how it could fix and repair it on the get-go. This was a difficult one to code in PowerShell, and PowerShell I'm already pretty good with. It's just kind of a weird language. This one, I do it a bunch of different ways. The first, if WinGet's already installed, which it should be on most systems, except for maybe LTSC and some more obscure ones that people use, like custom ISOs and crap that I tell you not to use. I know, but some people do it. WinGet might not be even a package in the store, and some of the AppX stuff might have been purged. But it first tries to just upgrade WinGet with WinGet. Believe it or not, that's actually probably the most efficient and more standardized version to always get WinGet upgraded. And then it fails back to the actual package manager using like NuGet to get that installed. And then it fails back to the Microsoft Store. Or actually, it goes to the store, then the NuGet method. And then finally, the GitHub direct install method. Now, I was using Chocolatey as a fallback and some other ones to install WinGet, but a lot of these things just change so often, and Microsoft changes things so quickly that it's almost impossible. This GitHub method fails more often than it succeeds. And that's the current state of the WinUtil. But I wanted to kind of show the different methodology here. Like, the idea is to install something, but for WinGet, since it fails so often and it changes so often, having 3 different methods to install it seems crazy, but it should just go like a waterfall effect and go, hey, did it install using WinGet? Nope. Fail back over. Okay, did it install using Microsoft Store? Failed. All right, go to the NuGet method. Try NuGet to install it. And then if that fails, then it goes to just direct install from GitHub and using PowerShell direct. So it's kind of a fun PR I worked on for the past month. Hopefully that goes live sometime in the next couple of weeks. I need to do some more testing on that before we go further. WinUtil is a really good spot right now, and we're just going to continually update it as more problems arise with new versions. But with 24H2 dropping just a couple months ago, we should have some breathing room until probably March or April if Windows or Microsoft sticks to its about 6 months update cycle. And then finally, Win One Shot. Now this one, I actually separated this out into a private. This is something I wanted to work on myself. And what I learned from after a lot of these projects is sometimes I just really like being by myself, learning it, testing it, and then just having a few people look at it and then refining it more instead of it just blasting it to the world. The downside when you have everyone looking at your code is it's hard to make really big moves and jumps and changing to your program. So what I've learned in this time is when you're first starting a project out, private it, kind of mold it into what you want it, get it structured and looking exactly kind of how you want it. Then you might want to open it up if you want to go open source, or if you want to just keep it closed source, that's also okay. It just depends on what your prerogatives is. But I even for private projects use GitHub extensively. The other thing I've learned is doing PRs and commits every time you make a change to your program will save your bacon so many times. Like, I can't tell you how many times I nuked it and then I was like, crap. All right, well, git reset hard and then type in the commit in, and then it just pushes it all right back to that date and time, and all the code just reverts magically back. And I'm like, all right. And what happens with software development too, people can, I think as a new person, when they're first starting out, like if you look at this, actually, I just changed it to a GUI application yesterday. And I think, where do I put that? I think it's main window CS. So most of it is in here now. And pushing it all here, this was probably the best. I honestly, a lot of people crap on C# and .NET, but I've had the easiest time programming in C#. I don't know why. I know a lot of people like Go, Rust, Zig, all these like new fancy languages. I really like C#. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm brain damaged. I know I'm a little weird, but to me, it just made a lot of sense. And I really had a lot easier time working privately just using C#. And especially developing for Windows applications, I find it's pretty darn easy. And I really like a lot of the resources at my disposal. And maybe because I think back when I'm in my 20s, I did develop in C++. So having that and then moving to C#, somewhere in my brain, I kind of kept some of that knowledge. And it seems very easy and very intuitive to me compared to like Rust as a counterpart. Rust has a lot of weird syntax that I was running into, and I was like, oh, that's strange. It just works different. And just my thoughts here. But walking through this project, I had just having a ball with it. Like when I'm programming and I'm sitting here, I've been able to kind of pull it up, and I have kind of a unique setup. I'll usually just pull into here, and actually let's just go into my project, and we're going to just do a .NET run just to kind of show you what this does. This is the past day I've kind of been building this out. So I've got a GUI now for it instead of it just being a console application. And then the idea was switching it from a regular runtime to an async runtime. So it's just very, very fast. Instead of debloating and removing and just constantly like brute forcing, like we do on our PowerShell script, it can read a lot more of the system and say, hey, those packages are already installed. Let's skip that. And there's a lot of really nuance to this, to where you can just be so much faster. Also, one side effect of Win1Shot was this is a complementary project because it uses the tweaks.json from WinUtil. And what I ended up doing was building a very verbose system where if it fails to set a registry entry, a service tweak, it sends out error codes with return values. And then I can look and troubleshoot the JSON file much easier, which also fixes Windows utility. So while I don't know if this will ever really be public, from like a widespread usage standpoint, I initially developed this with an idea of pushing it out to a whole bunch of systems at once, so I could configure a bunch of Windows systems really quick. And what I found is, one, I can be a lot faster than PowerShell because, well, C# and .NET and having direct access to the system, you can do things in an async format where it just does things all multiple at the same time, to where you can configure and tweak 10 times faster than PowerShell, 20 times. I don't know what the limit here is, but it's a lot faster. I do know that. And I can do it all direct. So having this, and then coupled with the verbose output of it, I can find, hey, this allow telemetry thing, when we're setting this, I need to look at that JSON tweak and say, hey, what's going on with allow telemetry? Did this change? Did these get updated by Microsoft all of a sudden? And then it's very easy with updates when Microsoft changes some of these tweaks or makes some of the tweaks either obsolete or makes them invalid to where they don't even work. It'll spit out an error message, and I can look at those tweaks direct and go, hey, what changed between 23H2 and 24H2? And then update multiple projects, both WinUtility and Win1Shot at the same time. So using Win1Shot actually has been fantastic because it showed me certain tweaks we were trying to do that are no longer valid on the latest version of Windows, specifically going from like automatic to automatic delayed start for like the bit service, which is the background intelligent downloader. You can use bits to download things pretty fast from the CLI. And I started looking at this and I was like, this is really cool. So as I started building this project out, it's helping me improve Windows utility as well. And I've just been really obsessed with this. So I've been in Windows a bunch during this process. And I think from a development point of view and a development environment, one thing I found as well is I really like standardization, like just having things work right out of the box and having my standardized setup in multiple different locations has been a big game changer. So that's another thing I would tell you is when you're building things out and you're learning, standardize your environment first. Say, hey, this always works for me. This is the environment I like to code in, and then just have that everywhere. And the less you have to change to get to that environment, the better. If you're doing all these massive tweaks to your system to get a whole bunch of different, a 5% efficiency upgrade or whatever, chances are you're not really getting that because you're spending so much time to do that tweak. And what I found was this base version of Windows with just my tweaks applied to them, which Win One Shot pretty much does them all for me, or Windows Utility as well, just running the standard tweaks. That's been fantastic. And I've been able to troubleshoot a lot more of it, a lot easier, and get to coding a lot more. And maybe if you're interested in this, let me know. I can go over kind of my development environment because I do for like C#. You're obviously have to use Visual Studio a little bit. I do use Cursor quite a bit. I find whenever I have questions, it's like having a programmer to the side of me I could bounce things off of and going, hey, what's a different method I could use to accomplish this? And then I go, hey, this is what I recommend. And I'd be like, oh, that's dumb. More often than not, that's kind of my thought. But it does give me other ideas. And I'd be like, yeah, I don't like that one. Show me a different way. And there's just so many different ways to do things in programming that it just opens up my mind. Every time I code, it feels like another like vein or avenue opens up for me. And I love it. It's just fantastic. And I'm learning so much about all these different things. And I'm just enjoying myself. And that's the thing is you got to enjoy programming. I think a lot of people think go buy a course and just learn it traditionally. I don't think that's valid, or at least wasn't valid for me. Another thing is people think, hey, I'm going to learn this one language and it's just going to do everything for me. I don't think that's valid either. I think you kind of have to try a whole bunch of different languages and then figure out which one you really like to program in, and then just focus on that one for maybe a year or two. And then maybe switch after you really get a good base understanding of it. Because I find myself right now, after 5 months, I have a very scratching the surface, maybe 1-2% knowledge of most of these languages I showed you today, from Python to, well, PowerShell I've been using for decades, so probably quite a bit longer understanding of it, and also shell scripting. I'm just more competent in those areas. But also getting into Rust, I've touched it. I'm just terrible at it. I've gotten this stupid book. I've gone through. It's been an absolute nightmare of a language to learn starting out, and it's one I don't recommend. I don't regret my time with Rust, and I think Rust is an amazing language. It's just not for me right now. Maybe in a couple years, I'm going to probably pick it back up. But for now, I really think my language, and this is sad. I know a lot of links people are already yelling, running in chat. The people that are actually here after this long rambling rant. I just really like C# and .NET. It speaks to me, and I'm able to do everything I want to do in it. And it's cool for building Windows apps. Like if you want to build a Windows app, I don't see a better language to use, and I love it. And that's funny because I always bash Microsoft. I never miss an opportunity, but When it comes to Microsoft, the documentation, the lookups, like I could sort by downloads when I go to the .NET and go, hey, I need to use this framework, and it's great. So yeah, this was kind of a jumbled video about my 5 months in programming, and kind of where I ended up is not where I thought I'd be. It's just kind of like a very like roundabout way of going places in programming. But I absolutely love this stuff. It is amazing. And I look forward to the next 5 months. And I couldn't see myself stopping now. I look forward to the next day and what that looks like, and what the next programming language or the next project that I want to improve and do. Right now, I'm just obsessed with Win One Shot and just making that the best it can be, which also improves Windows utility. And I love all these issues, and the beauty of, I think, why I ended up settling on Windows and Microsoft a lot of times is there's just so much wrong with it. There's so much to fix that, and they keep breaking things every single day. It's like the ultimate challenge, and I love it, but everyone's dealing with it. And there's tons of, like, millions upon millions of users just constantly getting screwed. And I'm like, well, I can fix it. I can help these people. And, yeah, let me know if this video is anything other than a complete rambling rant. I don't know. I feel like I should just delete this, but here you go. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm trying to get to keep a video a week going, and maybe I'll do another update to my programming process, but this was the overview of 5 months. Later, y'all.